All right, welcome everybody to our third workshop in this farm employment workshop series. Glad you all could make it. Great to see some familiar faces and see some new folks. Happy we're here together. We got a couple great presenters lined up to share tonight. So I'm happy you've made the time to join us. And yeah, questions are welcome throughout. I'll try to monitor the chat. My associate Sydney will also be monitoring the chat. So please share your personalities, your questions, your comments, resources, especially. Happy to hear from you all. Um, I'm Ben Zoba. I'm the beginning farmer educator at New Entry Sustainable Farming Project. I'll give a brief 5-minute intro and then hand it over to our esteemed presenters. But we are going to be sending folks follow-up resources, the recording and slides from the presentations, as well as some other resources. So if your name in Zoom is at all different than the one you registered with, feel free to change your name and go into the participants section and rename it to whatever it was that you registered with, so we can make sure we have your proper email address to get you those follow-up resources. If it's easier to send me a chat with your full name first and last, you can do a private chat, whatever works for you. We just want to make sure we can get you those slides and the recording. Feel free to add. I know a lot of you already said where you're from, but if you care to share your farm name, maybe there are other people here that could become friends and partners in the work if you're in the same region or have similar interests. And then obviously you heard that the meeting's being recorded, and my coworker Sydney will be monitoring and helping post links in the chat. So you may see her popping into the chat. The overall plan for the day is, after my brief intro, we'll hear from John Hendrickson, who I'll introduce before he goes, and then he'll present and have time for a Q&A, and I'm guessing around 7 p.m. We'll switch over to our second presenter, Maria Zordan, and she'll go for 45 minutes, and then she'll have a Q&A after her presentation, and if John's still around, he may be able to answer some questions then as well, if you think of others that you'd care to ask. A little bit about New Entry. We do a lot of things that's hard to speak about in a short amount of time, but generally we're trying to train the next generation of farmers and help other farm organizations share best practices and cooperate toward that end. We have a few different program areas. I live in the farmer training team. We offer courses and host workshops like these. We have an incubator farm program at our site in Beverly, Massachusetts. We also have a food hub, a food aggregator that buys from our incubator farmers, alumni farmers, and local growers in our region. And we have a CSA that's aggregated from various farms locally. And then we also have a national program that connects with other incubator and apprenticeship programs to try to help each other train the next generation of farmers together. At the end of this, when you log off of Zoom, you'll get a brief 8-question survey, very quick, mostly just kind of multiple choice or multiple choice. But it really helps us improve workshops and also report back to our funders. We're able to make these free thanks to the funder whose slide is next. But they like to hear, the impact of how farmers and course participants are benefiting from these workshops. So it helps us a lot. And finally, if you write down the last couple questions are what's the takeaway? What kind of action item do you care to implement after this workshop? If you write something down, you're more likely to actually do it. So it can help you make actionable what you learned about today. As far as upcoming events, if you all know of any that folks should know about, feel free to post them in the chat. If there's a workshop or some kind of training coming up that you think people should know about, or if you're part of an organization about to host something interesting, feel free to promote that in the chat. As far as what New Entry has coming up, we've got our farm business planning course starting in January 13th. It's a Tuesday night class, and anyone's welcome. We work through the process of writing a farm business plan, and I think Sydney will put in the chat the link to learn more about that. You're good, Sydney. So yeah, it would be great to have somebody in there if you would like to work on writing a farm business plan for your farm or prospective farm. This is part 3 of a 6-part series. This is where we are now. In about a month, we'll have a workshop on thinking about payroll and whether to go with a payroll service or do your own, and also look at some legal aspects regarding managing payroll. So we've got some good presenters lined up for that, and hope you can join. Part of the follow-up resources we'll send with the recording is a link to register for that if it interests you. And we want to thank our funder, the Northeast Extension Risk Management and Education Group. They think it's important for folks to be thinking about farm labor and how to be strategic about it. And so they've funded us to run this workshop series and make some other resources. So grateful for that. Now, enough from me. I want to introduce our first presenter, John Hendrickson. John has operated his own vegetable farm, but now he's a farm viability specialist for the Center for Integrated Agriculture Systems at University of Wisconsin in Madison. His work focuses on farm management, farm financial benchmarking, and record keeping. He's going to introduce you to a great tool he manages, the Compass Tool program, and we'll learn all about that and get pumped up. But John, I'm super grateful that you made the time to join us tonight. I'm so happy that we get to hear from you and soak in your wisdom. So welcome and thanks for joining.
Well, hopefully I'll be able to come through on the wisdom side of the equation. Thanks, Ben. Thanks, everybody, for joining tonight. Ben just did a great job introducing me. I did run my own farm for a number of years, like about 15 years. Although I was always, I was quite small scale and really would qualify as being part-time, a part-time farmer back when I was doing that, because I have worked at the Center for Integrated Ag Systems since I was a graduate student. The ambition was to eventually cut the umbilical cord to the university and just run my farm, but that never happened. And we can talk about why and how that didn't happen. If people have questions about that in terms of my specific experience as a grower. Certified organic farm, sold almost exclusively to restaurants. So almost exclusively wholesale, but very small scale. So kind of an anomaly in that I was small scale, but almost exclusively wholesale. This is what I'm going to try to do tonight. I'm going to give you an introduction overview to the farm labor dashboard. I know my colleague Beth Holtzman, who was the first speaker in this series, talked about the farm labor dashboard, but I've been working with her on that project, and some of the tools I'm going to be talking about are on that website. So I'm going to cover that. I'm going to spend a bunch of time talking about a tool that I've created that's on that dashboard that helps you estimate the full cost of labor. I'm going to tell you everything I know about payroll taxes. And then I'm not going to allow you to ask any detailed questions because I will have exhausted my knowledge about payroll taxes in that overview. Not a payroll tax expert, but I know enough to get by. Going over the last set of topics are going to be things I'm going to be kind of hitting on a little bit more quickly. My main focus is going to be on that cost of labor tool at the beginning. We also have created a brand new tool on the farm labor dashboard, which is titled the Equipment Cost Recovery Tool, which helps you gauge the impact of a new piece of equipment in terms of labor savings. So to designed to answer the question, how quickly will this tool pay for itself in terms of improved labor efficiency? And then as Ben hinted at, I'm going to share a little bit about the Compass Tool program, but that's not the primary focus of our evening tonight. The Compass tools require their own hour or more to go over, so I'm just going to briefly introduce those tools. All righty. The Farm Labor Dashboard was a multi-year project over a number of years involving a number of different organizations. Our funding came from a few different sources over the course of that time period. I think we got 3 or 4 different grants to keep the team together to build what is now the Farm Labor Dashboard, which is kind of meant to be a one-stop shop, although all the resources are free. A one-stop place to go to answer questions, get resources, use tools to help you with farm labor management. It's housed at the University of Vermont. This is what the homepage looks like. Before we built the dashboard, we did a series of interviews and focus groups with farmers and farm service providers to get a handle on what people thought were the main challenges and struggles that they were having with labor. And so that guided the resources that we built on that website. Our kind of the mission statement of the website is we believe that good decision making around the type and amount of labor needed on a farm enhances the farm household's quality of life and increases the likelihood farmers will successfully meet their financial goals. The site provides tools and strategies to help small and mid-sized fruit and vegetable farms make informed labor decisions. I'm going to briefly touch on the fact that there's a really comprehensive set of resources on the website that are searchable. And if you click on resources, you get this little form to put in what you're looking for. We do have some resources in Spanish in terms of other languages being available. You can also search by material type in terms of videos or written material or workshops, what have you, and then you get a bunch of resources after you've applied those filters. I'm going to spend a bunch of time talking about our employee cost estimator, which is in the tools section of our website. And if you click here, you enter into the employee cost estimator. You can create an account on our website. It's a free account, and it basically just allows you to save your work and come back to it at a later time. You're not required to create an account to use the tools, but the information won't be saved anywhere, and so you won't be able to come back to it. But you can just use the tools, download the reports, and move on. I will say that there is no one on the back end of the website that is looking over the saved material there. No one in their right mind has time or reason to do that. So don't be concerned that your information is being viewed on the back end. Just simply a way for you to save your work and come back to it. So the first thing is to name your report, and then let me back up and just explain a little bit further about what this tool is designed to do. If you've never been an employer before and you're thinking about hiring your first employees, you're probably first and foremost thinking about what hourly wage you're going to offer those workers. If you're going to be above board and not pay people cash under the table, that hourly cost is not the full cost of having an employee. There may be benefits that you offer to that employee or incentives. There also are payroll taxes and unemployment taxes that come into play. And so this tool is designed to walk you through a process to estimate the full cost of having a worker on your farm. So you can put in a job title on this page. Then after you click hours, you can enter the hours by month that this worker is going to put in. Again, this is an estimate. It may not be the actual hours that are worked, but this tool is designed to get you an estimate. Here we ask for wages and benefits. So the pay rate per hour. Are you going to offer food? Are you going to offer housing? Are you bringing workers in from overseas so you have H-2A expenses? Are you going to offer any insurance programs? These things are not necessarily that common for a first-time employer, but they do sometimes come into play, or a retirement plan, any bonuses or gifts, and then a catch-all other that you might want to use for any reason in terms of costs for per employee. The next section is where we get into those additional costs. Federal income tax and Social Security and Medicare is based on a certain percentage across all states, as is federal unemployment tax, which is currently at 6%, which has been unchanged since 1983. There's some details here that I'm actually going to go over later in terms of explaining how federal unemployment tax works. There's then a place to enter state unemployment tax information. State unemployment tax varies by state and can get, it behooves you to do your homework so that you're entering in the right information for your state. And here are the spots where you put that information in. FICA is filled in already at 7.65%, as is FUTA. You may not qualify. You may not have to pay federal unemployment tax, and I'll explain when you might not have to pay that. And so you can change that to 0. Likewise, you may or may not be required to pay state unemployment tax. We've entered 0 there because we don't know what state you're coming from. And so you have to go out and do your homework in terms of your state unemployment tax rate. And then there's also a wage base for state unemployment tax. And I'll explain that a little bit further as well as we go through the tool. Those are the data entry points. And then there's a section about workers' compensation. And workers' compensation is even more complex than the federal and state income and unemployment tax issues. And we have a percentage here, and in most cases, the cost of workers' compensation is not easily boiled down to a simple percentage. It changes over time. It depends on what's happening on your farm, whether you've had claims. It depends on trends in the industry that you're in your state. And so this changes over time. But with some homework, talking to other growers, talking to people in your state's workers' compensation program should enable you to come up with a guesstimate percentage. And 6% is actually a fairly reasonable percentage if you don't want to do your homework. Workers' compensation is also not something that all states require a farm to carry. It is a good business practice to have workers' compensation or some form of insurance to cover workers in the event of injuries and accidents on the farm. But in many cases, a farm is not required to carry workers' compensation insurance. After you click enter, you get a report. And for this report for Uncle John's farm, we've got what the report looks like. The top part of the report summarizes the information that you entered in terms of number of hours, the pay rate, the total wages based on that pay rate and hours, the benefits that benefit information that you entered. And then further down that form, we list the payroll tax calculations, the workers' compensation calculations, and then you end up with a total cost for the employee and a total labor cost per hour. And this is a really useful number for you to know as a grower. You might kind of instinctively think that when your workers are on your farm and you're sending them off to do a job, that that's costing you $16 an hour because that's what you thought of, that's what you decided your pay rate was going to be. It's really more important to think about this fully loaded cost in terms of the work rate, the work cost on your farm. And so this is a really important number for you to know. You can go back and edit the information. And so in this report, I've compared, I'm going to minimize my Zoom stuff so I can see my slide here. We've compared the same number of hours, but at two different pay rates. And we can see what the difference is in terms of the total costs at the end. So these reports are downloadable as PDFs. If it allows you to do these side-by-side comparisons to measure the impact of different hourly wages or different benefit packages. You can investigate multiple different job positions at the same time. So you could have one, a field crew person or a pack shed manager or a field crew manager that you investigate all in one. You can keep adding positions within the tool. And as I said, if you make an account, you can save your work and come back to it. This tool is also available as a spreadsheet. I am a hopeless spreadsheet geek, and so most of the tools and work that I do involve spreadsheets. And so this tool was originally a spreadsheet, and then working with Beth and the other people involved in creating the farm labor dashboard, we turned it into an online tool. It is still available as an Excel spreadsheet. If you click on this first time using this tool caret, this opens up and this gives you the option to download the Excel version. I want to say a little bit about the Excel version because it's a little bit different than the online tool. We weren't able to convert exactly what I created in Excel into the online tool. The Excel version allows you to investigate 6 different employee positions at once. I don't think the online tool is limited. I think you can kind of, maybe not infinitely add employees, but I think you might be able to go beyond 6. I guess I'm not quite sure about that. This is the first page of the Excel version, which has you name the employee position, indicate a start date and an end date, and how many hours per week they're going to work. And then the total hours for the year are calculated. And we actually have 2 different methods for you to enter in hours. You can do this method if you know the start and end date and the hours per week, or maybe the hours per week are going to vary through the season because you're going to hire somebody part-time in the spring when you don't have as much work to offer them, and then they're going to become full-time during the growing season, and then maybe in the fall you're going to decrease their hours as well. And so this bottom chart allows you to enter hours by week if the hours per week are going to change for an employee. You can use a combination of both of these forms when you're using the tool. If you start using, whoops, I thought I was in the spreadsheet, so I thought I was going to do a live demonstration there. So I tried to click on one of the cells. If you start using, like if you filled in for employee 1 up here, employee 1 down here gets grayed out to remind you to not double enter and use both forms. Likewise, if you start using the form down here, the cells up here gray out. It is important for you to enter the first day of the year in question up here because of how Excel works and how the formulas in Excel work. You need to know the first day of the year that you're going to be that you're using the tool to investigate. So, January 1, 2026, if you're investigating labor costs for next year. This page is pretty much exactly what the online tool walks you through in terms of an hourly wage, benefits and additional costs for employees, the payroll tax information. We do have a SUTA lookup Down here, that's automated. So if you plug in your state, you'll get the new employer rate for state unemployment tax and the wage base that that percentage is applied to. There are also some resource links built into the web, this Excel version. Here is a link to the Massachusetts Institute of Technology Living Wage Database, where you can plug in your county and learn what the living wage is for your area, if that matters to you in terms of deciding what to pay your workers. And then there are also direct links to some fact sheets that are on the Farm Labor Dashboard that help explain federal and state unemployment tax and workers' compensation. The last page of Excel does do some different things in terms of output that the online version does not do. It gives you, in addition to giving you total net pay for each worker, it calculates biweekly net pay if you're going to pay workers every other week. And it also calculates net pay per quarter, which is useful for when you're filing federal and state unemployment taxes. And so it does all those calculations for you. So it's a little bit more robust in terms of the information that's presented to you than the online tool. So I promised that I was going to give you a rundown about federal payroll tax basics and the unemployment tax basics.
John, real quick, before you
Sure.
move on to that, there was a question in the chat. Will the estimator also accommodate contracted labor expenses?
Let me think about that. I've never been asked that question. What a great question. I suppose you could use the tool to calculate that. If it's a contractor, you would leave all of the the FICA and FUTA and SUTA things blank because that contractor is responsible. They run a business where they provide services to farmers. So you could use the tool to do that. I'm not sure what the benefit would be because you're going to be entering into a relationship with a contractor where you're going to negotiate the rate and they're going to, if it's a contractor, they have to use their own tools on your farm, which is an important thing to remember if you're hiring contractors rather than employees. If a contractor's on your farm using your tools, they're really no longer my understanding, and you can ask Rachel Armstrong, who I noticed is your last presenter, who knows labor law way better than I do because she's a lawyer, that question. But I believe that if a contractor is using your tools on your farm, they no longer really qualify as a contractor. So that's an important thing to know about farm workers versus contractors. Did that answer the question adequately?
From my perspective, it did. Jose, if you want any follow-up, feel free to ask. Okay, yes.
Super. So, federal payroll tax basics. Again, I'm not a payroll tax accountant or IRS tax person. So this is the basics. And if you have detailed questions or unique circumstances, I'm not likely to be able to answer your question. So the way federal payroll tax works for a farm is that you need to pay Social Security and Medicare taxes in any calendar year that you meet either of these two tests as a farm employer. If you pay an employee cash wages above $150 or more in a year for farm work, or if the total of all the wages that you paid to all farm workers is more than $2,500. That second rule is basically to prevent you from paying a whole bunch of people $149 to avoid paying into Social Security and Medicare. So in most cases, you're most likely going to be paying an employee above these, and so in most cases, you're going to be paying into Social Security and Medicare taxes. So the way it works is that employers withhold the employee portion of payroll taxes and remit that to the IRS on their employees' behalf, and then they pay the employer portion. And that's done by filing Form 943, and 943 is specific for agricultural workers. If you have non-agricultural workers on your farm, you would use different forms. And it's important to, and I'm sure Rachel Armstrong is going to talk about this, so I apologize for stealing some of her thunder. But some work on your farm may not qualify as agricultural labor. For example, if you have a farm store on your farm and you hire someone to be in that farm store and service customers, that work is not farm work by definition. And so that worker is going to fall under a different classification, and you're going to need to handle that worker differently. Similarly, if you hire someone to just work at your farm stand at the farmer's market, that worker is not a farm worker. If a worker is doing both of those activities, it gets complicated, and I will leave it to Rachel to give you advice about how to handle that. But my understanding is that you need to treat things differently depending on what the worker is doing at any given time during the day. If you're like me and you hired your children to work on your farm, you do not pay into Social Security and Medicare taxes for them if they're under the age of 18. The due dates for Form 943 are by January 31st. And then Form 941 is actually filed quarterly with due dates that you see there. By January 31st, you also need to file or give a W-2 to each employee who worked for you for the previous year. If you've ever had a job, you understand what a W-2 is. And you as an employer will now be creating that W-2 for your workers. You send a copy of your W-2, of that W-2 also to the Social Security Administration by the last day of February or March if you file electronically. And that's to report the total wages and taxes for employees for the previous calendar year. So that is kind of the very basics of federal payroll taxes. And again, that pretty much kind of exhausts my knowledge of the system. So if you have super detailed questions, I would wait and ask Rachel that during the last session of this program that New Entry is offering. Unemployment tax basics. A farmer is liable for federal unemployment tax, or FUTA, if they meet either of these two conditions. There's a cash wage test. You pay agricultural workers a total of $20,000 or more, and this is all workers, in any calendar quarter. So if you are a if you're a small farm hiring your very first employee, you will probably be under this wage test in terms of a given quarter of the year. There's also a 10 worker test. If you employed 10 or more farm workers for at least some part of a day, whether or not at the same time, during any 20 or more different calendar weeks. That's a super complicated test that probably isn't relevant for most of the audience as newer, younger farms that might be hiring their new workers. But as you get larger, this can be an important threshold, because once you pass these thresholds, the FUTA tax obligation begins immediately and continues for the rest of that year and the following year. So there are farms who may be kind of right at the cusp of whether or not they qualify in terms of these. And so it behooves you to understand these thresholds and juggle things if you're trying to stay underneath that threshold. The FUTA tax rate is 6% on the first $7,000 of wages paid to the worker. So if you when you pay more than $7,000, you no longer are paying that 6%. That 6% is only charged to the first $7,000 in wages. So essentially, it's capped at $420 per employee for the year. State unemployment tax rates and wage bases are similar. They do vary by state, and so you have to find this out for your state, whether it be Maryland or Rhode Island or Florida or California or what have you. But it generally works the same. There's a wage rate and there's a base, and that rate is applied to that base. And then above that, you are not paying any more in once you've hit that wage base. There is tax credits. If you pay and file your SUTA taxes on time, you qualify for a FUTA rate reduction, which changes it from 6% to 0.6%. So the $420 per employee becomes $42 per employee. All of this made building my spreadsheet super complicated, I will tell you, because I had to write some super complicated formulas to make sure that once those rates are hit, the tax is no longer being paid. And then if the SUTA is being paid, that the FUTA tax rate is reduced. I told you that this exhausts my knowledge, but if anybody needs clarification for what is on these slides, I'm happy to go over it again before we move on.
There is a question in the chat. Do you think payroll companies know about the SUTA tax credit?
I would be astonished if they didn't, because I mean, that's their business. That's their job to understand the rules. And so I would be flabbergasted if they were not aware of that. Because that's been in place for a while. I don't know exactly how long that's been in place, but I think that's been in place for quite some time. So they should be well aware of that. That kind of is a nice segue to the next slide. Actually, some future slides. I take it back. I've got some slides before I talk a little bit about payroll services. So that's what employees are going to cost. One of the big questions that growers have when they're hiring their first employee is, oh golly, can we afford an employee? How much of an employee can we afford? And how can we make sure that we have cash on hand to pay our workers? Well, the short answer is that you need to use a cash flow budget worksheet. What is a cash flow budget worksheet? This is an extremely abbreviated version of a cash flow worksheet that has you spell out your sales for the year, and not just your sales for the year, but your sales by month. So when are sales happening for you as on your farm? When does your sales season begin? Does it start small and grow bigger and then trail off? You know, what's the bell curve, and when do sales happen? Likewise, you're going to have certain expenses through the year. You're going to buy seed, you're going to buy potting mix, you might buy some fertility inputs, you're going to buy fuel, you might pay for insurance, you might have labor on your farm. When are those expenses happening? So it's putting together a budget and then putting a time element to that budget. When is income happening, and when are these specific expenses happening? Sometimes you don't know when exactly a specific expense is going to happen, especially as a new grower. But a lot of it you can budget and plan for. And this is a worksheet that allows you to do that. Again, this is just a simplified version. You might have many more rows for sales because you might want to put in sales by market channel. And you obviously may have many different categories of expenses. I've just abbreviated here so I can fit it onto a PowerPoint slide. So this is what a cash flow budget might look like filled in. Um, I'm not, these numbers are actually roughly based on a year of my farm from many, many years ago. Not complete numbers, but numbers from my farm. And so here's my sales began in May and increased and then decreased, and I sold $34,000 worth of produce for the year. I had some expenses that are listed here. Down here at the bottom, we have cash on hand. So my business bank account was, and this is not real, but if it was at $5,000 and I started spending, I bought seed, I bought my potting mix, I bought fertility, I started paying an employee. You can see that my bank account is going down. That gets down to as low as $375, but then my sales pick up and I don't go negative. This is the utility of a cash flow budget. But what happens if I don't have that $5,000 cash in hand in the bank at the beginning of the year? What if I only have half of that? Well, here we see some numbers go negative or go red because I don't have enough in the bank for all my expenses. And so, oh golly, I've got a worker that I'm projecting to pay $500 in May, and I don't have any money in the bank to pay them. So this is why you do a cash flow budget. And this is where you can play around with either projecting more sales, starting a CSA program so that you have income earlier in the year, selling winter storage crops so that you have sales during the winter months to hopefully have more money in the bank. And this is where it also behooves you as a business owner to move expenses around. Some expenses it's hard to move around. But when you sign up with an insurance company for business insurance, they will ask you when you want to pay your insurance bill. And so you can put that in a time of the year when you're more likely to have the money to pay that bill. And there's other expenses that you can move around. Like maybe you start pre-buying your potting mix in December instead of waiting until February to buy that. So you can shuffle expenses around. So here's another version of this cash flow budget where we've got a starting balance, still that lower starting balance in our bank account, but we're selling CSA shares, and so we've got income, and so we actually go we don't get anywhere close to negative in this hypothetical example of our cash flow budget. People understand the principle of a cash flow budget and its utility? Hearing none, I will move on. So this is the slide that I was saying that it was a nice segue. The question about does a payroll service understand about the SUDA tax credit on FUTA. This is just some general advice about and information that I've gathered. I've worked with and been around small farms for my entire career. There are certainly a lot of people that do it themselves, which is what I did when I ran my farm and I had one employee. Having one employee doesn't necessarily make it less complicated because you still have the complexity of doing it, but you're only doing it for one. Do you have the time to do it though? And there's a cost benefit analysis to be done there in terms of the time that it's probably going to take you longer to complete the forms, and you may miss deadlines because you're not on top of it, unlike a payroll service or a tax accountant, who really knows what they're doing and can give you reminders. And they have that expertise, and they're having to follow the rules. And as the rules change, they're having to stay updated on the rules, and that may be harder for you as a business owner to stay on top of. There are plenty of people that use QuickBooks and use the QuickBook payroll service. Um, Plenty of people who decide to hire a tax accountant to be involved to make sure that they're getting things done the right way and in a timely manner. Patriot is one program. OnPay is another. These are just some ones that have been frequently mentioned to me by growers. I'm not advocating, and any business or program that's not listed here does not mean that I don't think they're any good. These are just ones that I've heard of growers using through my years interacting with folks. In terms of recording worker hours, some folks keep it simple by using Google Sheets and Google Forms. I did a lot of that on my farm. There are time clock apps that you can use either on a phone or an iPad in your in your work in a worker break room, what have you. There's a Homebase app that I've heard of and heard good things about. There's a Total Pass time clock. Again, these are just things that exist that I've heard of growers using, and not necessarily my recommendations.
John, quick question in the chat. Jose is saying most programs allow the infusion of funds from savings into a cash flow statement. Will this program allow this too? Jose, I'm not sure which program you're referring to. I don't know if John, you can tell.
Maybe he's referring to my cash flow worksheet, which is just basically a simple spreadsheet. And so that's certainly a way to handle cash flow on your farm. Is when the business bank account gets low, you as the owner may bring in funds from a personal savings account or your spouse's. Your spouse may be underwriting your farm operation by by contributing to the business bank account, and that's you can certainly adjust things in that manner. That spreadsheet that I was showing you was just a simple spreadsheet and was not a program that would necessarily automate that for you in terms of an influx of funds to cover a loss. There are obviously lots of ways to juggle cash flow. There's providing personal funds from another source of money within your household. There's getting an operating loan to cover expenses that you pay back later that year when cash flow improves and you have money in the bank. There's lots of ways to make that work, but without doing the cash flow budget, you can't identify where there might be a shortfall. I firmly believe that when a farm hires their first employees, it's a great opportunity to get serious about tracking information and gathering really useful information on your farm, which is the amount of time that's going into your entire farm, into different enterprises on your farm, into different crops or products that your farm produces, into different work activity areas, and to get serious about cost of production data so that you can make smart decisions about pricing. And this leads into the Compass tools that I have developed, which I'll be talking about at the very end of my time. And Ben, can I do a quick time check and have you tell me where I'm at?
It's 6:50 right now.
Oh my. I've been blathering at the mouth.
Well, you've been answering some good questions.
So this leads me to what I call BLRKPs. I absolutely don't call them that because I can't even say that acronym. That stands for Best Labor Record Keeping Practices. I really believe that I know that labor is the biggest cost on specialty crop farms, of which a vegetable farm is one. And so I really believe that it's important to track costs. And so it's important to track labor on a farm. And getting serious about that is not easy, but there are ways to track labor on your farm so that you can make database decisions about where you're going and how to achieve your goals as a producer. It's super challenging. Keeping your system simple and easy and developing that ahead of time and not trying to develop a system during the middle of the season is wise. You need to make record keeping part of your standard operating procedures. And you need to not put it off until tomorrow, because when you have a busy day and you don't take time to do record keeping and you say, oh, I'll have time to do that tomorrow, tomorrow is never easier than today. And so it's best to just make it happen. What I did on my farm is I required my first employee to tell me their time by crop, rather than just telling me that they worked 7.5 hours that day. That's may seem like a big ask, but it's not that hard to do. And that gives you really important information about where labor is going on your farm, which can help you with understanding your cost of production. If you simply are not a good record keeper, find someone who is, and that can be involved in your operation. Maybe that's an employee, maybe it's your spouse, maybe it's your son, maybe it's your mom or dad. But designating people to be responsible for record keeping makes it happen, because then you have accountability. And when you use records to make changes, it reinforces the record keeping habit. Keeping detailed records is really hard, so you can do it piecemeal, do it in pulses throughout the season, decide that one day a week is record keeping day, and you're going to track time on that day to be getting a handle on it. You can decide to focus on key crops that you are suspicious of in terms of their profitability. You can invite a friend who's interested in your farm to come and be the timekeeper. You can develop a table with standard times for tasks that you do over and over again, like seeding flats or preparing a bed or transplanting or direct seeding. And all those times that you go out to harvest, keep track of the time that it takes. It's important to take measurements at different times of the year to account for variability. And I'm going to quickly run through some ideas for labor record keeping tools. A lot of people use a journal or a calendar or a logbook on a daily basis. A lot of farms employ a whiteboard in their washing and packing area so they can keep track of orders and what they're going out to harvest. If you're writing information on a whiteboard, why not write down how much time it took to do a task? Not just that the workers actually brought back 100 bunches, but how much time did it take? Doing what I said in terms of a time card, having the employees write down what crops they worked on rather than just the total number of hours is super simple and not that difficult for your workers. Other methods that you could employ is an end of the day interview method. When you sit down, if you finally sit down at the end of the day, you could have your spouse or child interview you and take notes. And then there's obviously all kinds of apps and things that we can use our handheld devices for. And I want to spend a little bit of time giving you a couple ideas about that. When I hired my first worker and told them that they were responsible for telling me what crops they worked on throughout the day, this is what they decided. This is how they decided to do it. So this was not my idea, but their idea. They used the voice recorder function on their farm. And they'd say, it's 7 a.m. John just told me to go harvest beets. 8:30, I have the wrong crop here. The beets are dug. I'm now starting to harvest on kale. Then they would press play at the end of the day and fill out their time card. You can use before and after photos. When we take photos on our farm, they automatically have a timestamp. And so you can take a picture, a before and after picture. This tells you how long a task took. It also gives you nice pictures that you can send to customers or post to your Instagram account or your website to get folks excited about those onions. And then it also can be used to show workers what done looks like. When we harvest onions and we're laying them out to cure, this is what it needs to look like. There's all kinds of time management and time tracking apps that you can use on your phone. There actually used to be one called Beat Clock, which was specifically for farmers. When I checked most recently, I did not find that in the App Store. Apps only work if you use them. And I know a lot of growers have tried a lot of different time tracking apps and have expressed frustrations about what they can and can't do. Um, I've tried my hand on, it's not really an app. It's a Google Doc form that you can use as a record keeping device to track labor on your farm. In the interest of time, I'm not going to go through this, but it allows you to track time in a various ways that you set up on an admin section of the sheet. And so you can track labor by employee, by task, by crop, or any combination of those. This is available from me. It's a little bit complicated to get set up, but once it's set up, you can use it to track labor on a daily basis. And it actually also calculates payroll hours by weekly or monthly based on your choice. I feel like I'm really running out of time. So I feel like I should stop because I don't want to eat into Laura's time. And I also want to leave time for questions.
Yeah, that's great. Very practical tips you just shared. There was a question about record keeping. How may I record paying employee for mileage? Any tips on that?
Where to record it or how to record it?
Jose, I don't know if you want to ask any follow-ups, but or you can unmute. You're welcome to.
Yes, both. Where and how. For example,
So,
I also pay mileage for an employee going to a farmer's market besides their hourly rate.
okay. And are you paying a different rate for mileage, or are you talking about just paying them in terms of like the standard rate to compensate someone for
Yeah,
mileage?
the standard
Yeah.
rate. Mhm.
Yeah. I mean, I'm in love with spreadsheets, and so I would use a Google Doc form to record that, or have that available to the employee to enter their mileage. I mean, I would think it would be pretty standardized if you're sending, the same worker to the same market. It's not really, it shouldn't vary. Um, so it's more about the number of times they go to the market, and maybe that's variable across your workers.
Yeah, sometimes it is for different
Okay.
markets because they most of them use their own vehicle.
Okay. Yeah, I would just, I mean, have that be part of the time card that you use, to record hours for the week. That would be my recommendation. Keep it simple.
Nice.
Thank you.
And John, we had another question going back to the employee cost estimator.
Mhm.
Um, Jose was saying in California, there are various wage rates in certain cities. And
Mm,
so if I pay a staff member at a farmer's market on a Saturday or in one city and work on the farm at a different wage rate the next day, how will the program work in this situation? And then somebody else kind of had agreed and wanted to hear the answer because in Massachusetts and maybe other states, you can give a certain rate for farm labor, but then if they're doing farmers market work or things that aren't directly
yeah.
labor, there might be a different rate.
Yeah. Those complicating factors were not uh, in my mind when I built the tool, especially how complicated the labor regulations and rules are in California, which has probably some of the more complicated progressive rules in our country. And so I think that case may defy the capacity of our tool, and I apologize. Um, Given that I think you're talking about paying an employee for both farm labor and non-farm labor when they're at market, I think that the best way to do that is to basically call those different jobs. You might be hiring one person to do, both of those jobs, but you could call those different jobs in the tool and thus have different pay rates for those different jobs. So it would be possible, the report that would be generated would have those jobs separated out, and then you could look at it and combine those together, if those two jobs were going to be combined into one person's duties that you were going to hire. I know that's not perfect, but it would enable you to still use the tool to play around with the costs.
Nice.
Thank you.
And we've still got a few minutes if folks have questions for John.
I'm going to scroll through some slides and point out some things. I know that the desire was for me to talk about scaling up realities when a farm is growing and hiring their first employees. There can be some serious growing pains and questions about, well, is it the right time for me to hire my first employee? And there's no there's no formula that's going to, that you can use to make sure that it's the exact right time for you and your particular situation. And I think it's important to recognize that scaling up is not just about size, but about complexity. When you add crops or market channels or other enterprises to your farm, that in some ways is maybe more impactful than growing the absolute. When we think about size, we mainly think about, I'm going to grow, I'm going to have a half more acre or a full more acre of production. And I think the complexity of adding crops and enterprises is perhaps even more challenging. Um, and my belief is that you can never be too small or grow. Maybe you can grow too slowly, but you can't. It's way more likely that you might start too big, or grow too fast, or become too diversified too quickly, and spread yourself too thin. So I'm a believer in more incremental, thoughtful growth, which can be less painful and less risky. Um, it's easy to fall into a trap of saying yes when you're a beginning grower and you're desperate to become a full-time farmer, and so you say yes to things. I remember saying yes to things when I was a farmer that I really regretted later. Um, it's important to try to make a plan for the year and stick to that plan and not fall into the trap of saying yes, or, oh, I'll just seed a few more flats, or I'll plant a few more rows. And I really believe that you should expand only as your capacity to stay on top of weeds allows. And I also will relate that, being disorganized and having that only fall on your shoulders because you're the only one working on the farm is one thing. But if you're disorganized and you start hiring employees and you can't find the tools and you don't have a work plan for the day, that really can be a disaster. So it really pays to be highly organized when you're starting to bring other people onto your farm to work for you. Some really sage advice from, I'm not sure if Bart Hall is still at Atra or if he's retired, but his advice is to expand your farm because it is profitable, not to make it profitable. I really want to get to my last slide, which has my 4 steps to a profitable, satisfying farm business. which is to start keeping records. To keep keeping those records, we often have to restart keeping those records, and we've got to choose one of those. If we don't keep records, we can't track progress to our goals, whatever your goals may be, whether that's being a part-time farmer or a full-time farmer or whatever your income goals are or your quality of life goals. If you're not keeping records, you're not going to find your way there by magic.
Awesome. Great advice. Great presentation, John. Any final questions for John while we have him?
I'm going to stick around, um, and I'll hang out to the end if folks do have questions or if my input is needed.
Awesome. Well, appreciate it. And thanks so much for wrangling all those formulas into spreadsheets and making them available to us, and for offering to share that Google tracker too for folks who email you. It's very generous. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben.
All right. Before I hand it over to our next presenter, I did want to just remind you, I think Sydney has been pinging you about this, but if your name is different than the Zoom name, I use the Zoom log to track attendance, but I need to be able to send you an email. So if I don't know what your last name is, I might not be able to send you the recording and slides. So make sure you either send Sydney a private message with your full name or email address, or change your name up here to whatever you registered with. And then final reminder, when we log off at the end of this, after Maria's Q&A, there will be a very brief survey, and it's very helpful to us if you just take a couple minutes to fill that out. Thanks. All right, so yeah, I just want to hand it over to Maria, who is joining us from MX Morningstar Farm. So she started with a marketing background and got involved helping MX Morningstar in 2015. She helped them develop marketing strategies and personnel management. And then by 2018, she became a co-owner, and she's led the business to the place where it's kind of renowned. You probably maybe have heard of it, but it's got a farm and a retail business that is well attended. And she's done all kinds of different things at the farm, but now she's kind of stepping back from the day-to-day operations to take a more managerial role. She's got a lot of experience and insights to share, and she's good at answering questions too. So I'll try to monitor the chat. But Maria, thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you here. Thanks for making the time.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. And thanks, John. That was if I could have had that 10 years ago, that would have been great. Really, really good presentation. I could have listened to that for another hour. So I feel like I am here to give you all kind of my farm's perspective on how this all works. But I don't actually recognize many people from this group, so I'm going to introduce my farm a little bit. We have been in operation since 2014, but we've gone through many iterations as a farm. So we began as quite a large farm with employees. So our farm began in 2014 in Copic, which is near the border of Massachusetts and New York, with 5 full-time employees, seasonal, plus Max, and cultivating about, I want to say it was 25 acres of mixed produce. So our leasehold was 70 acres, and we expanded over the next 4 years to grow about 50 acres of produce. And we are pretty much a story of a farm that grew too fast, too much, and we definitely suffered the consequences of being understaffed, and not fully fleshing out what our goals were. We always had, good cash flows and good budgets, but not really understanding that we had to get very good at what we were doing before we took these leaps. So our business's time frame can kind of be split into Copake and Hudson. So then we grew from a kind of smaller diversified farm that did a few farmers markets, multiple CSA drops, a farm stand, direct wholesale, and worked with distributors, to switching almost entirely to wholesale in 2016 and continuing that trend until we moved our farm in 2019. And that kind of opened up the new part of our business, which has ended up being a primarily retail-based, retail as in the farm store on our farm based business. So we've grown exponentially in that area, and it's come with a whole lot of, benefits, which translate into very good cash flow. But also much higher expenses and a whole other part of our staff that is not agricultural. And so navigating both the ag side and the retail side, because they're treated differently and paid differently. And that's where I am now. So now I've kind of stepped away from harvest management and CSA management and working in the high tunnels and whatnot, to taking a step back from the agricultural's day to day and managing both parts of the business. So I'd love it if you guys could send questions as I'm showing you stuff. But I'm going to show you our very first, which I somehow found, budget workbook. So this is from 2014. So, and just to show that when you're first starting out, you don't really know. So you're making a lot of assumptions, and that could be based off of a place that you worked at before, other farmers you're talking to. I mean, you do know to a certain extent how long someone will work during a day or during a week or during a season, and how much you're going to more or less pay them, right? But this is our very, very first budget, which I'm going to now screen share. Okay, let me just. All right, that's showing. Okay, great. So we had our 5 employees, and this was our first labor spreadsheet, trying to figure out, how many hours worked per month. And that is it. This didn't really work out totally. Our income was lower than expected, but wages back then were also a lot lower. And that has been actually one of the most apparent changes over the past few years, is how much wages have changed. But now let me show you. And this was back to 2014. This was our first kind of figuring out how to pay for stuff financial worksheet. So, our farm started with an owner's investment, and 2 loans. So the shareholders loan was actually, I'm pretty sure, a new entry loan that we got, and then a bank loan, and then Max's equity. So it was very much trying to put as many numbers out there as possible, so that when the season ended, we could go back and start filling in the data that we were missing. We've always used QuickBooks and then just other spreadsheets to track this. So QuickBooks to track all of our expenses and all of our income. I recommend using a software of the sort. Doesn't have to be QuickBooks. And then our own spreadsheets to track different things. Now I'm going to show you 3 years later, a slightly different iteration of our financials. So this is what our cash flows looked more or less like for the majority of our business when we were just a farm. So the way, and I don't know if if anyone has questions about it, but we've got all our income at the top and all of our expenses, as John was showing, reds when we're negative. And then you have to also remember that your budget will have a net profit or net income, and then after that net income, you start deducting from that for your owner's draw, for your loans, and things like that. So 2017 was kind of the first year that Max, who was the owner at the time, the sole proprietor at the time, was regularly getting paid. And this is something to keep in mind when you're writing your budget, is that we eventually put that at the forefront of it versus if we make enough money, if we have any cash left over, Max is going to get some money, right? We worked with a financial consultant and they were like, you can't do it this way, right? If you can't prove your worth, if you can't pay yourself at the end of the day, what are you doing this for? So that's another example from a little further in our business. So now I'm going to show you kind of it's not a spreadsheet I'm super proud of, but it's kind of our labor, more accurate labor budget workbook. This is just for the farm, so I'm not going to really talk about the retail part. So I apologize, this is left to right, which I don't really like, but what we've done here is kind of a couple of things that John was talking about, right? Is like, what parts of your labor cost are you not really thinking about at the beginning, right? So you've got your paid time off, your vacation time, holiday pay, your FICA, your workers' comp, your unemployment insurance. I don't have those two things in here for some reason, but this is kind of how I do it. And also because it's nice to put these things out there for employees to also see, to be like, okay, this is how much I'm getting paid per hour or in a salary, but this is also how much I'm getting, right? So whether it's in vegetable benefits, in paid time off, holiday pay, we pick certain holidays that were closed, and so people get paid like a regular 8-hour workday. And this, especially when I feel like especially when you're starting out and maybe you're not able to pay as much, right? Maybe someone's making minimum wage. It's like, okay, they're making minimum wage, but I'm also giving them like $5,000 a year in produce, right? And so quantifying that is very important for them to see and also for you to know. But this is our labor budget from last year. This is our actual. And then here is our actual for this year. So our labor is really, it's about 50% of our farm income. And that's a lot. When I look at the retail labor, which is 25% of the total income, this is a lot. And this is one of the things about farming, is that your labor is going to be your biggest cost, right? And this is what it cost us, right? The take home is what people actually made. And then you're adding in all those other things we talked about. Are there any questions about this? Okay. Okay. So now we can look at our 2025 budget. This is a very simple one. We, for a number of years, worked with the same bookkeeper who knew the farm inside and out, and her budget projections were very much like, this is historically what we've done. These are all the new she knew exactly what was going on. So our budgets these days with our new bookkeeper are a little bit more like, oh, this is going to increase a little bit, this is going to decrease a little bit. But this is a very simple one for our income, which is split between retail and farm. And then all of our cost of goods sold and all of our expenses. I don't know if this is helpful for people to see or not. I think one of the things I want to highlight too is accounting for, when you're writing your budgets, accounting for the expenses that come with your expenses, right? So like paying people comes with these other expenses, like insurance, just like buying in stuff comes with expenses like shrink. So it's good. It's good to know. It's good to like keep track of those things and categorize them properly if you're using QuickBooks or whatnot, so you can go back to them year after year and see, where your costs really are. I like to break things out in a lot of little categories. I'd probably do more. But this is kind of how we do our budget is you've got your fixed expenses, general and administrative, that's like, legal and professional fees, meals and entertainment. We've got a big one for that. But then labor is broken out right into your actual costs, and then your other expenses that come with labor. We use a payroll company. I feel like for some reason that either might not be in here or might be somewhere else, but so our payroll company expense is also another thing. It's about, let's say it's like $50 or $60 a week. And we pay weekly, as you should by law, just yeah.
One question we had in the chat, Maria, is the farm stand a separate business?
Mm. No. So the way we manage the farm stand, same business, same books. We classify expenses and income in QuickBooks between farm and store. So payroll gets split out, income gets split out. Then we try to split, like general maintenance things or grounds upkeeping and stuff into whether it's like more retail or more farm. So we did not start a new business for that. We do have some different bank accounts, and we're trying. It's a little iffy at times to figure out exactly how much money the farm is either making or losing at any given point, and the store, because things don't always go into the software as well as you'd like them to. But one of the reasons we didn't split them up is that at the end of the day, because because of the way our farm is staffed with 4 year-round employees, 2 of which are salaried, our farm is the farm's labor budget is higher than we would want it to be. And the farm is slowly becoming a little bit of a marketing expense for the retail operation. So they can't really exist one without the other. Yeah, anyway.
No, it's interesting.
Yeah.
There's a related question. You kind of touched on it, but Stacy's curious. Hi, Stacy. how do you track veggies that go from the farm and are sold in the farm stand? Is there like an internal transfer that's
Yes.
happening?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the store gets invoiced for all produce that we sell to them. That gets dealt with through a journal transaction. So we have a barter account in QuickBooks. This way, twofold. A, the store needs to keep track of its costs of goods sold, regardless of whether they come from us or not. And B, the farm is selling hundreds of thousands of dollars of produce to the store, right? So if we don't see that, if as part of our income, even though it's coming in through the store, then the farm is completely unviable. So that has to be accounted for in some way. So yes.
Great question and great answer. Another follow-up, kind of going back to what you were saying before, how do you track the quantity and cost of vegetables paid or given to the workers?
So we actually do a farm card. So we still have a little crew section, but it's we used to do like a pick sheet for staff, and so they could say like, okay, I want a bunch of this or a bunch of that. And two things happened. We tried to get rid of that because it was becoming a little overbearing on the harvest manager, and some people were kind of taking advantage of it, either like going off and harvesting on their own while they were at work. Like, we always let people do it before, after work, that didn't matter. And B, also to help quantify it a little bit better. So what we started doing is we started making gift cards basically for all of our employees, and there's a weekly stipend on them. And they can use that at the store, and then past that amount, they get a discount at the store. And honestly, that worked out better than we expected. Like nobody actually wanted to go pick their own carrots. And then we still have a little crew section, like if people take a cabbage, whatever it is, we don't count that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. I don't have any more spreadsheets to share, but I'm wondering if anyone wants to kind of talk about the less nitty-gritty of it and a little bit more of the um, human resources part, kind of figuring, maybe it's still nitty-gritty, but kind of figuring out like where do you start your starting wage, and then how do you add in all those benefits? Like who do you want to be as an employer, and how do you figure that out? Does that sound good? Okay. For me, the starting wage generally directly correlates to the quality of employee you're going to get. 99%. If you haven't hired anybody yet, I would say your information will come from how much you're currently making now and how that makes you feel, right? Both financially and emotionally. And also looking at other job postings from the area, and then also using the living wage calculator. For our area, the living wage calculator puts a single person at $24 an hour. Our starting wage is 22. And we've gotten there very quickly. I mean, our area is really expensive. Most people we hire are married and live with the spouse. But we moved to this property, and I think our wage was like $15 an hour, and we very quickly after COVID had to go up to 20 to 22. So a lot of it is also if you're not getting applicants, or you're not getting the applicants that you're really looking for, then even just $1 or $2 bump will do that. We started our business at $10 an hour, so I I can't really imagine starting right now and paying that, right? It's much harder, a much harder entry point. The other thing is like the benefits package that you both that you have to, that you can, and then you want to provide, right? So that you have to is either federally or state mandated. So if you have paid sick time, New York State has a paid sick time policy. I don't really think there's a lot of other mandated things other than having workers comp and sometimes paid sick leave. Our our idea was always that we wanted full-time employees to have the number of vacation days that Max and I want. So for us, it was 4 weeks paid time off. And so the way we did that is we started by giving people 5 days for every year they worked. And that helped us kind of age into it much more naturally. So it's thinking about, what makes you feel good and how do you get there? And then other things are like holiday pay or reimbursing people for mileage. I mean, you have to do that, but like making sure they know, right? Making sure they know that they can get reimbursed, that if they go to a workshop, maybe their time is paid or that they do have paid vacation and such. I think that makes for that package feels a lot more comprehensive and it feels like real work versus kind of a more seasonal position. And I think it makes an employer feel good to be able to offer these things, and that's important as well. The other thing is making a policy and also kind of maybe working it into your year-to-year budget, how raises work. Why are you going to give raises? When are you going to give raises? And how much? So we have a policy written into our employee manual that says there's a automatic 3% raise every year for each employee. That's kind of like a base. You get that regardless of any other factor, right? That 3% increase is subject to other pay raises. So if say you get a 5% pay raise, then you don't get that 3% on top of it until you're at the year. So that's how we do like general raises, and then we do other raises that are you took on more responsibility. You're doing really, really well and have exceeded expectations. We can pay you all more because the business is doing better, right? So that's a really good policy to have. Other thing, the employment benefits that we talked about before is making sure also that those are written down somewhere so people can see them. This one's a little bit more, I personally feel like once someone has been there a couple years, let's say, is professional development. Is ensuring that people feel comfortable or that you're taking them to conferences or, they can bring workshops to like this one, say, I really want to do this workshop. Maybe not the one where you start your own farm somewhere else, but a lot of our employees have gone on to start their own farms. So, but I think it makes for employees to be able to go and learn new skills or meet other farmers, I think it makes their job feel really real. I think farming suffers a lot from this kind of, it's farming, so it's hard and it's underpaid, and therefore there's kind of this lack of professionalism at times. And this is a quick way to make sure that there's a more level playing field for your employees, and so that they feel that their job is real and is important and that there is learning to be done. I feel strongly about this one because of those reasons. Yeah. Um,
You're getting a couple questions in the chat,
okay,
yeah. And also, if you want to stop sharing, we'll see your
yeah,
image a little bigger,
sorry.
which is nice. All good. Um, you may have touched on it while I was reading the chat, but do you do end of season bonuses? And if so, how do you decide how much?
Yeah, we do end of season bonuses. They are a profit sharing bonus, so they're not they're not like, oh, you did really well and I want to give you a bonus. So there's a policy for it. It's based on years of employment and it starts at a 5% bonus. You have to have worked here for 6 months. And every year you've worked here, that bonus goes up and it caps at 10% of your total yearly income. Your yearly income to calculate this does not include any paid time off or paid sick leave. So it's however many hours you actually worked. For our salaried employees, it's just based off your base salary. Um, yeah.
Great. Thank you for sharing. Another question, if I can ask, in the chat, how do you set the experienced salaried employee rate to comparable recent college graduated worker? For instance, a farm manager, I guess.
How do we set it?
Yeah, how to set
That's
the experienced salaried employee rate?
recent college graduate worker. I'm not sure I understand. Like
Joe,
someone who might be going to work somewhere else.
Joe, if you can unmute and clarify that you're
Sure. Hi, Maria. Thanks, Ben.
Hi.
Yeah, I was just wondering, like, so if I had to make a decision between two great candidates, one was an experienced farm manager that I wanted to hire, but then a recent college grad like walked up that might have a PhD or something, but or maybe just, just tech school, I'm not sure. But a qualified candidate, do you have other I don't know, variables or considerations because, just experience maybe or what do you use for your criteria? Just wondering.
Yeah, definitely. Ooh, okay. So definitely experience. One of the things that has been really hard has been finding like mid-level management. I, we get a lot of entry level, and I think a lot of people who've been farming for a while want to go off and start their own farm. It's fine. Max would tell you never to do it. You do your own thing. I think it's great. But if you are getting two applicants and one has experience farming, and I would say that if you were hiring for an entry level position, I will take the inexperienced one any day over the experienced one. Because untraining somebody is the hardest thing you will have to do. For a management position, I've never had to deal with that kind of comparison. Um, I would say I'd lean into the one that does have the farm experience if you expect them to take on farm stuff from the start, you know? Hope that helps.
nice.
Yes, it does. Thanks.
Another question in the chat. How does housing play a part in the wage calculation, or what percent of per hour rate should be for housing? I don't know if you have any experience offering housing a bit.
We have housing for H2A. Technically, as of next year, you're allowed to deduct income from them for the housing. They've also capped the adverse something wage rate for them. We will not do that and we'll keep their wage rate the same as it was last year. I think that I don't know if it's state by state, but I've definitely seen numbers out there for how much you can deduct. In the early days, what we used to do, because we rented some rooms out to employees, we just charged them a rental. So they got paid as normal, and then they paid us, $100 a month or $200 a month for the room. Okay.
Great, thank you. Another question. I noticed you have two employees at $33 an hour. What are their roles?
Yeah, so that's that's kind of the hourly rate that kind of comes out when their salary is divided by their hours. So there are two farm managers. So they're year-round, full-time. Um, they've been working for us since 2021, and one of them actually worked for us the first 2 years of the farm. They've both been farming, one of them for almost 18 years, and the other one for 10, I believe. So they have a lot of experience. We have a what I call kind of a field manager. She runs the day-to-day operations in terms of labor management. So harvest, CSA. She does all of the fertility, crop planning, field planning. She kind of has a bird's eye view of everything, and is our main H2A manager. The other person is our production manager. So he pretty much does the work of two people, because we've had a really hard time finding another production person who can run different kinds of equipment, different size tractors, different pieces of machinery. So he does most of our field prep and field cleanup, and then Max and I do a little bit of the other stuff like cultivating, mowing, planting, and such. And he makes sure that all the machines are maintained, all the farm vehicles are maintained and such.
Awesome. These are great questions. Can I
Yeah.
keep rolling with the questions, Maria?
Yeah, I'd love it.
Okay. I was just curious about what price the farm charges the farm stand for produce they grow, wholesale prices or retail prices.
The store gets charged, generally speaking, regular wholesale prices. So a price that I would sell something to like our direct list for delivery. Some things uh, maybe they'll pay a little less for, but generally speaking, it's just wholesale.
Awesome. Thank you. Another one, would you feel comfortable sharing your employee handbook specifically around the employee-related sections you were talking about today, expectations, policies around leave or bonuses or workshops, onboarding, training, payroll tracking? I'm glad to hear that you're talking about where you started versus how you grew the team over time.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes, I think it's good to look back and be a little embarrassed sometimes. Well, not good, but if you're at a point now where you look back and you think, wow, we have come a long way, that's great. It means you've made improvements. Yes, I don't know I can email it to you, Ben, but I'm happy to share our employee handbook. I um actually stole someone else's employee handbook to write our own, so just keep that going. And we didn't write an employee handbook till 2017, and then we didn't update that until 2024. So I'll make mistakes.
Well, it's very generous. Thank you. Yeah, we'll make sure that's available in the packet we send out to everyone eventually. Cool, thanks. Another question, do you offer any medical benefits or stipends?
We do not, but it has been on my mind for a few years now. We priced out health insurance packages, and it just because we still had New York State of Health, it just didn't make sense. People would be spending either the same or more for a similar or worse um, insurance plan. I've thought about giving them, a stipend for health insurance for sure, but we don't at the moment.
Another question, do your workers have standard hours or when needed?
Yes, so we have a standard work schedule, including uh, so our standard work schedule is Monday through Friday, and then depending on, well, not depending anymore. So now we work alternating every other Saturday for a half day. So these past years, it's been Max and I with one person plus the guys, and then Steph and Will with one person plus the guys. Those two people are the high tunnel and post-harvest managers. So there's a set schedule, and we make the decisions on when those dates start for those 6 day a week alternating schedules in like April, and it gets put on a joint calendar. So any work days that are beyond that Monday through Friday are on a calendar, so that people can switch around if they need to. Maybe they've got a wedding or whatnot. Those Saturday days tend to be very important to us to catch up on transplanting or during the fall for bulk harvest, because we do a lot of fall storage crops.
Great. And then last question I see in the chat, do you have any systems for communication between farm crew and farm stand?
Yeah, so we use Slack, like among the whole farm. Lots of different channels. So the biggest communication need between the farm and the store is for produce management. It's like any updates. Oh, you're not getting this today because of such and such. Or you're getting this, it was not on your list, but it's ready. Pricing questions, quality concerns. So there's a farm store produce Slack channel that we use, but then we also use it for wholesale orders. The store uses it internally, the farm uses it internally. We use it a lot. Uh, and that's mostly how we do it. It has been really hard actually to integrate the two teams because the work schedules are very different and the work is very different. Um, so that is something that I need to work on.
And then I had a question, if you'll indulge me. I don't know if there's more you wanted to cover, but John mentioned needing to manage your cash flow and with such an operation as yourself. I remember in our pre-workshop chat, you were mentioning you've had success getting operating loans to
Oh,
manage
yeah.
cash flow in the early season. I think,
Yeah.
yeah, you want to just share a little bit about
Yeah.
that,
I haven't talked about loans. So our we started using an operating line in 2016. This is because we dropped our CSA, which for those first 2 years was our operating line. It was our early season income. We dropped our CSA, we dropped our farm store, and we went down to one farmer's market that year. So we worked with Farm Credit East, who we owe most of our money to at this point. And I think we started with a $60,000 operating line, and now we have a $90,000 operating line. The biggest difference for us has been we went years fully using the whole line, including needing to borrow money back after a first year, after a move to pay it back. So it is tricky because you do have to pay it back at the end of the year if you have a bad year. Like we've had, you have to get creative. So we borrowed money from my parents and we borrowed money from Berkshire Ag Ventures to pay it back. But ever since 2020, we've basically stopped borrowing the full amount. But it's been great. Now we have a CSA again. We still use it. I think it has given us the ability to not stress out so much of how many seeds am I going to order? Should I order all the soil today? Like it used to be every $500 had to be accounted for, and it was very stressful getting into the season. So that's one. You can also get an operating line from the USDA. I believe you have to be in business for 3 years and do all your paperwork with FSA and get a farm number and such. But then the interest rate is much lower.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, that's great. Any other questions for Maria? Or I think John is still around too if you have questions for either of them. Or Maria, if there's anything else you care to talk about, you're totally welcome.
I can talk about a lot of things, but I don't know. I
Yeah,
want
you
to
don't
talk
have
about
to.
things
We
people
can.
are interested in. I don't know how much more info about our farm would be helpful. Um,
All right, here's a question. How many employees does the farm stand have?
we have two managers and we have 6 employees. So we're at 8 in the farm store. We're a little overstaffed because our farm store manager is going on maternity leave in March. And then her husband, who's the other manager, will be taking part of that with her on either end. So we're overstaffing because as I think we all know, as soon as someone's out, 2 more people are sick. So do that. So, but our store started out with one person 5 days a week running all the shifts. That was in 2020. And then Tess, who's the current manager, took over in 21. And then she had one full-time person. And then we were open 7 days a week. And then from there, we've grown each year. And now we're at 10 people in there.
Amazing. And then regarding the farm stand, are you open year round,
Yeah.
7 days a week?
Yeah, we're open year-round, 7 days a week. So 2019 was technically our first year. It was basically a hole in the wall, and we were open like 3 days a week, and Max would run in. Sometimes my sister. It was just kind of chaotic, and it just had our produce in it. 2020, we like put a door in and put a fridge in. And that year we were open seasonally from May through, let's say, maybe Thanksgiving. I remember. We had one full-time staff member, and then Max or I would switch in as needed. And I did all the produce ordering at that point for the store. Then when Tess took it over, she took over all of that. And 2021 was our first year open year round, and we've been that way since.
Amazing. Another question. About what percent of farm stand revenue comes from selling the produce purchased from the farm?
Hmm. Don't have that off the top of my head. Not a big percentage. Maybe like 15%, 20. Yeah, not more than that. We sell. So one of the issues is if anyone else here is a produce farmer, you know that it doesn't make a lot of money per pound, right? So we sell meat and fish and like pies and ice cream and fancy fruit and like all these things that have a much higher value per pound or per package. So we actually like per unit produce is our number one, but value wise it's not. My top selling
Makes
items
sense.
one year was ice cream sandwiches. It is our top selling item is actually radicchio. We sell it almost year round, so that helps, but it's generally like salad, greens, lettuce, anything in that category, lettuce, arugula, spinach, radicchio, that kind of stuff. And that's by unit kind of thing, pounder each. So produce is kind of always the number one in terms of units. Mm.
Great. Any final questions for either of our esteemed presenters here? All right. Well, I just want to thank both of you, John and Maria, so much for joining us. What great insights and tips and tools, templates, and yeah, very, very helpful. Thank you to all of our participants. Excellent questions. It's so fun when we get the back and forth, and our presenters are excellent question answers, so that made it really fun. But yeah, we'll be emailing you all follow-ups, and you guys are getting thanks in the chat, John and Maria. Hope you're seeing that, getting the hearts on the screen. But yeah, unless anyone's got any final resources, tips, anything you want to, oh, Sydney's giving me a note here. Oh yeah, remember to take the survey. Thank you, Sydney. Good reminder. But yeah, I'll let you all go. Thank you so much, John and Maria. Really, really appreciate you joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for all the questions. I'll send the employee handbook too.
Awesome. Thanks.
Thanks, Ben.
Yeah, thank you, John. Good luck driving to the airport tomorrow. That's
You
very
bet.
exciting. Oh, there we go.